All right, let's get started. It's 7 p.m. on the East Coast. I'm Cynthia Ko, Executive Director of Operation Code, and this is our January workshop. Today we have a guest speaker. His name is Mike Trockman. He's the CTO of Codesso and MentorWorks. And so we will talk a little bit about what Mike does, how he got started in his tech journey. Feel free to save your questions. You can put them in the chat and then we'll address them in the Q&A after. And we'll go through what Codesso is and how it's available as a free tool for Operation Code members. So I hope that this is a game changer for you guys as you're learning coding, if you're experienced programmers, to help save time, all of the above. So let's take it away, Mike. I'd love to introduce you to the crew. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in tech.
Sure thing. So this is me. Yep, I'm Chief Technology Officer at MentorWorks. So my contact information is shown there. I got started at a pretty young age getting into software development and code. As a teenager, I had a home computer back in the, I hate to say it, I think it might have been the 80s. And so I've always been interested in technology and computers and software. I went to Boston University and got my undergraduate degree in computer engineering, which is actually a little bit more of the sort of hardware aspect of things. There's definitely, software development involved in it, but I learned a lot about electronics and analog circuits and computer operating systems, but not necessarily learning how to code directly. And then my first gig out of school, I worked for a consulting firm and got a lot of experience getting out in the field, developing software, more like integrating pieces of software with each other rather than creating new things. And then I'd say mid-career, I developed a bespoke software. And in the last 10 years or so, I've been helping startups primarily help build and scale their technology to work well. And I've been at MentorWorks for a couple of years, maybe coming up on 3 years now. And MentorWorks itself is a place where students can go to find some funding for taking the next step in their careers. We work a lot with schools that are connected to Operation Code, coding boot camps, both for certificate programs and degrees. We've helped fund those students. And Codesso is actually a little tool that we developed kind of as a side project. Our core business is something called income share agreements, which are like student loans. But Codesso itself is a tool that actually helps our students with the education that they're being funded for. And we saw an opportunity there to help our students do more than just get their school funded, but to help them become great software developers.
So with MentorWorks, is it considered ed tech?
It's a little bit of ed tech and a little bit of fintech.
Okay.
We do a lot of finance stuff. Our CEO is a professor in machine learning and data analysis, and so we are in the education space, but we have a lot of financial stuff and at our core.
I'd love to pick your guys' brain and bring you back for another workshop specifically on entrepreneurship and being a startup founder. I'm a startup founder myself. Cool. 2 times, and definitely it's got its joys and it's got its challenges. So I definitely would love to have you back for that and talk about how did you guys get funding and how did you launch and how did you get traction and coming from a tech background and being kind of like this inner nerd, how do you know whether a product is going to have product market fit? Because we're all like, oh, I want to use the coolest stuff, right? And I want to use the coolest language. But if the users don't know how that works, or if it's not serving a purpose, sometimes it's like, okay, you're putting so much time and effort into creating something. And kind of bringing that back into code, I think the coding journey can be very tedious too, because you're so in the details. Like when you're doing a transition in your career, most of our folks are transitioning from military service, active duty, or reserves. Some of our folks are remaining in the service as a reservist or National Guard. They're pivoting to their tech careers. and what you worked on like 10 years ago is now obsolete. And so you've got to stay on top of these programming languages. You've got to know, hey, like my favorite thing might be Rust, and now like not a lot of people are using Rust. And so how do you pivot from that? Like what's a little bit of your personal journey on trying to figure out that like product market fit? How did you guys know that this product is going to like help people?
Uh, very lots of good questions, and would love to participate in another workshop. I had a good fortune of being part of a program called ICOR, which is run by the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, and it's a boot camp for technical and business entrepreneurs who have something that they feel is going to generate value, and they're looking for a customer. To establish that product market fit. You could have lots of great ideas and execute on those ideas, but unless someone is willing to pay, you don't really have a sustainable business. So I'd love to talk more about that experience with you. I think as far as languages, you make a fantastic point there. I wish I actually added a slide to my presentation today. There's something called the iceberg of languages. It's essentially a visualization of what languages are sort of out there, really popular. By the way, apologies if you hear a smoke alarm running, not a problem. The family's cooking dinner, but we're all good here. Thanks, guys. Anyway, so the language iceberg. So above the surface, you see all the languages that everyone knows about and is experimenting with, and just below the surface, you see all of the languages and technologies that are becoming popular and about to emerge. I highly recommend that. I'll try to include that in some of the resources, but one of those languages is Rust. Another one is Go. And so, how do I choose, which ones I'm going to focus on or what my team is going to work on? We do self-exploration. We figure out, what is the right technology for the job. Part of what I do is I develop technology, but I also design. And we want to do things that are purposeful and not just, use the hammers that we have in our tool belt to solve every problem. We want to find the right technology to solve the right problem. And there are emerging technologies, languages like Rust and Go that are very good at certain problems. And so that's what we do. We learn about what these things are, see if they're emerging, and then apply them, but only for the purpose that they've been designed for.
Got it. Thank you so much. I'll let you take it away on your presentation. And then folks, just a reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll address them in the Q&A after.
Excellent. Okay. So you know all about me. This is something I'm keenly interested in. I wanted to tell a little bit of a story and try and connect the experience I'd like to share with you with something real. For those of you who might be situated on the East Coast, I'm about 30 miles from this mountain called Mount Washington. You can see if you squint your eyes, there's an observatory at the top of the mountain there. And it's a great place to hang out. You can ski around here, you can hike, it's part of the Appalachian Trail. And there's some very interesting things that intrigue me as a person about Mount Washington and how, what we do here to sort of connect it to what Codesso is. Let's try to set a little bit more context here. So Mount Washington is known for some of the most extreme weather on the planet. I believe it's got something like the second highest recorded wind speed in history over land. That is, I think the first one is somewhere in Europe, and it also gets about 281 inches of snow, which is not the most snow in the U.S., but it's definitely the most that's regularly observed at the Mount Washington Observatory. And so, when you're hanging around these parts and you're an outdoorsy person and you want to enjoy that, you kind of have to know what you're getting into. If you're going to go outside, you're going to be tuned into the weather. And so how might this connect to what Codesso is? And Codesso has been described as something that helps an aspiring coder learn how to code. So let's given this sort of topic that I'm interested in and passionate about, let's put out a challenge. Okay, I've got a challenge out here now. If you're learning how to code or you already know how to code, this particular challenge here is not that easy to answer. And so I'm going to go ahead and try to solve this problem as if I don't know how to find a code solution to create a list of average monthly wind speeds on Mount Washington and convert that from one unit of measure to another, and then sort them from highest to lowest. It's a complex query, and one thing I might do is I might take this and I might try to Google it, right? So Cynthia, please stop me if you think. Oops. Please stop me if you think I'm. If you can't see what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, I can
All
see
good?
your browser.
Fantastic. Okay. All right, so I'm going to Google this result because this is the most common thing I hear about. Yeah, I go to some websites to try to solve programming problems, but often I just kind of start at a search engine that I'm familiar with. And so what's great about Google is it's really fast. You often get some things that make sense, but in order to really get to a code answer to this, I'm looking here and I'm seeing all sorts of options. Things to look at. Celsius to Fahrenheit. This is actually temperature. So we want like wind speed, right? Let's see. Convert a list of, should have done this properly. Wind speeds from mph to knots and sort them from highest to lowest. Sorry about that. And so the point here is that I've got a bunch of options. I could bounce off and take a look at some of these. I'm gonna spare you some of the pain, but I'm never really gonna get to a direct answer to this query. I'd have to break it up. First, I'd have to find out what is the formula to convert miles per hour to knots, and then another query to ask how to sort a bunch of numbers from highest to lowest. And so here I am spending lots of time trying to figure this out. And it's going to take me a while to get there, and I might get a little frustrated and might even be a little discouraged. So back over to this. We're actually going to come back to this because I'm going to present another challenge. You have to do this in a language you have no idea how to use. Now, many of you may have played around with Go. It's just a coincidence that Go is the language we're talking about here, but there may be some other languages that you have no idea how to use. Java, TypeScript, Rust. The point is that these things are not necessarily easy to solve, and I'm gonna have you park here for a second and think about, well, how would I even do this in Go? I have no idea. And just for a quick little background, Go was developed at Google in the mid 2000s, and it's a popular programming language for helping build out cloud frameworks, cloud services. It's high performance. It's very powerful. It has something called type checking or native data types, and so it's hard to make mistakes. And really, if you want to build out like scalable applications and services, you're going to want to look at Go as an option for building out that work. So when I showed you the Googling that I did, maybe I would have jumped over to a Stack Overflow page, and I might have seen a number of different potential answers to this problem, but I likely would not have found any good, precise answer in any reasonable amount of time. Think about when I did that, what sorts of things should happen to get me to that proper answer. Did it really understand the context of what your query was being executed in? Was it working in your preferred language? I asked the question and it gave me a little bit of Python, a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of TypeScript. Didn't happen to give it to me in Go because I didn't think to have to ask that. Did I have to wade through a lot of sort of promotional noise, whether it be ads or, if I'm looking in Stack Overflow, I'm also seeing lots of related resources that are distracting me from getting to the right answer. Was there actual code that could run as part of that response? And clearly, I'm not going to get that from Google. It's getting a little bit better at that, but there's still be quite a ways to go. And how much time, again, of course, did I spend getting to that answer? So back over to Mount Washington. Here's a little, another image of that extreme weather, and let's connect this to a story because we're going to use Codesso to help us code out a model to help me understand whether hanging out in a place like Tuckerman Ravine, where I can get the classic ski to east, or as we call it here, ice experience, can we code out a model that would allow us to understand whether it's a good time to be heading up into the ravine and either hiking and watching or go ahead and skiing down this challenging set of slopes. And what you need to do is you need to know before you go. If you're going to be riding or skiing these slopes, you have to be aware of one major thing, which are obviously avalanches. And there's a fantastic nonprofit organization called Mount Washington Avalanche Center, and they publish observations, forecasts, and even a little bit of rescue. They have a rescue blog and lots of educational resources. And you would want to check this resource first. So just making you aware of that. And what we might use Codesso to do here is provide an analysis or help us build an analysis. When would be a good day to go? If I'm going to hang out with some friends and decide, hey, I want to go up there for the day, how many days should I set aside in the calendar based on what we might call a good day? Low avalanche risk and, a certain temperature. Now, everyone might have different ways of going about this, but here's just a simple example of what we might define as a good day. That's my son hiking up the trail into Tuckerman's. So now let's get to what Codesso actually is, right? So if we're going to have this tool help us build a model, how does it work? So Codesso is a tool that goes with you where you are. It's AI based, and so you're hearing a lot about this in the industry these days about AI powered coding assistants. I think the most popular one that you probably have heard of is something called GitHub Copilot, and Copilot runs within an integrated development environment called VS Code, and it's offered on a subscription basis. This is an example of one that's gaining a lot of traction, but there also are lots of other AI assistance tools. And we've chosen to focus on providing Codesso as an easy to use tool. It doesn't have all the functionality that you might need as a professional developer, but it gets you the essentials fairly quickly and concisely. And so right now it exists as a Chrome extension. You would install it, you go to the Chrome web store, install it into your Chrome browser, and it becomes available either as an embedded experience, so it sits side by side with the website that you're using, or it can be accessed as a pop-up, where from any website you can invoke the functionality and use it. Again, optimized for learners, but useful for developers. And so you see the panel on the right there. Essentially what you're doing is you're providing a query, or maybe even some code. You're choosing what action you want to take. Do you want to generate code? Do you want to explain code? Do you want to search for a certain coding concept? You pick your language. And by embedding Codesso in popular IDEs, it actually selects the appropriate language by default for you. And then the responses that you'll get back when you click go, not to be confused with go the language, is you'll get a bit of code that you can copy and paste or transfer into various places. You'll get an explanation of that code, and you'll get some other resources sort of curated for things, the best of the web type stuff, not necessarily what Google would suggest, a little bit more targeted. And you can follow those resources along as you need. All right, so I'm going to take a moment, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a demonstration of Codesso actually working. I just wanted to pause here. Cynthia, do you have any questions or guidance you'd like me to follow as we continue on?
I think if you have the link for people to sign up, if you can throw that in the chat, and then this way they can kind of try it out either alongside or after the webinar.
Sounds good. Yep, I can do that.
And we've got some questions coming in. Keep them rolling. We're going to address them in a little bit after the demo.
Yep, I see that one question there. Happy to answer that as we get towards the end, or I might even cover it as we go.
Yeah, if you feel like it's relevant and you can have time to stop and talk about it. I was exactly thinking about ChatGPT as well.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, we'll definitely get into that. But we talked a little bit about GitHub Copilot. Yep. Good. All right, so let's try it out. So here is something called Google Colaboratory. For those studying data science or even playing around, it's kind of like the Google Docs for learning how to code in Python. While you can certainly do basic Python, it's really optimized for doing data analytics and visualization. It's kind of tuned for that, but you can use it for all sorts of learning exercises with Python. And you can see here, I've got Codesso running embedded as a panel. I can kind of park it if I don't want it in space, but because I installed it as a Chrome extension, it just becomes active. I'm going to do a quick refresh of the page here so you can see it in its initial state. And so This is a Colab is like a notebook. It's a document. So often what I do is I create a narrative of a problem I'm trying to solve. And so I'm using the features of Colab to document or narrate what I'm trying to do. And we might want to start with just like a really simple problem. Like, why would I even bother doing something with Codesso, just to kind of show you how simple it is. So I've got a couple of options with engaging. I could either just type in my query on the right here and generate some code, or there's a little bit of an early integration with these various online IDEs, notebooks, where I can transfer things that I select directly into the query engine. And so I'm just going to drag the you folks out of the way here for a second so I can see the rest of this. Good. And I am going to hit go. Still working on getting the various Zoom user interfaces out of the way. Okay, good. So in a few seconds, this returns a pretty specific answer to this question. I gave it a query with very specific numbers, and it came back with a specific answer that solves this problem. Now you can imagine trying to Google the same thing, or hop on your favorite site, whether it's Stack Overflow or W3 Schools, and try to answer this question. And obviously, it's not going to answer that. It's not intelligent enough to interpret what you're asking, and it's certainly not specific enough to give you a direct answer. And so Codesso, within a few seconds, it gave me, and this is a pretty simple query, it gave me a response. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this to the clipboard and pull it into Colab, which allows me to execute this Python. And I'm going to run it, and it went ahead and it sorted this stuff. So what Codesso is not is an execution engine. It's not going to run the code that it generates, but it will allow you to easily move it back and forth between the panel and the environment that you're in. So that's pretty simple, right? But let's try to make this a little bit more complicated, opt into some more complexity, because it can do some pretty amazing things. I want to pause just a second to let you know that Codesso is built on technology that you're seeing out there that's in use already. The technology is based on work that's being done at OpenAI. This company has been in the news. It's heavily funded by Microsoft. There's production applications running on it. And what we do with the AI piece of this is we optimize the prompt generation, what's called prompt generation, to ensure that the result that's coming back is ideal for the use case that we're preparing. ChatGPT is a little bit more of an interactive kind of mode of operation. This is purposely designed to be a little bit simpler in terms of query response. But technologies like ChatGPT are building on top of what you see here. Just a little quick comment on that. So because it's AI, it actually can do quite a bit more than simply providing some search results based on a query like Google might, or even Stack Overflow. So let's take a look at some data that I've collected from the Mount Washington Avalanche Center, because this is interesting to me in terms of building this model out. There's some data here that I want to be able to pull into something that I can use to analyze. So in the Python world, there's a library called Pandas that is used for doing a lot of data analysis. And so what I've done is I've literally screen scraped information from the Mount Washington Avalanche Center forecast page. I don't have access to the data set in CSV format or anything like that. I just copied and pasted it. And I'm going to transfer this over to Codesso. And I'm going to I'm going to say, can you make a data frame for me? This is a Pandas concept. So I'm just going to grab this. Oops. Hold on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to augment my query, which means it's going to add it to the bottom. So I present the thing that I'm sort of working on, and then I add to it a little bit more to continue to build the query up. And so it says, convert this table to a data frame called DF avalanche risk and display the first 10 rows. So I'm going to run this. Now, this is a little bit more of a complicated request. And so this is naturally going to take some seconds to resolve. We compare that against, how would you do this? Even if you knew how to code, how would you do this, really quickly? And if you're a whiz at using your favorite editor, maybe you can easily replace the tabs that are in the data with commas, and you can quickly convert it to either CSV or a dictionary or something like that. But this, in about 6 seconds, gave me all the code I needed to generate a pandas data frame. All right, and so I'm going to spare you the copy paste bit, but this is the code that it came up with down here. And if I go ahead and run that, this is giving me the first 10 rows of my data frame. And so I want to pause here, maybe look at the chat here. A few questions here and there, not too much. So I'm gonna proceed and show a few more examples of what Codesso can do in an embedded environment, and then switch the game up a little bit. All good, Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm wondering, since we have developers in our midst, if you guys want to experiment and maybe ask Codesso a function or a query yourself, type it in the chat and we'll play around with that.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Yeah, and so there's more that we can do here. Let's say that I'm new to Pandas, which is again that data analysis library, and I'm not sure. I've got a really nice table that I've developed here, but I can see that there's some columns that I don't want in the data frame. So again, in context, I can go ahead and add to my query. And so by maintaining the context, I'm more likely going to get an answer that's useful to me. So you can see how I'm building upon the original data set, which was tab delimited, all right, not in a format that could be directly used with my pandas library. But it went ahead and created a data frame for me. It then called the data frame what I wanted to call it, which is DF avalanche risk. It printed the next 10 rows, and now it's added the ability, or it's added, completed my request to drop a couple of fields. And so it would have done that. Now, you could have a similar experience with ChatGPT because it preserves the context of your chat. And that's going to be a really useful tool for certain things. But we feel for, aspiring coders, people who are kind of getting into this for the first time, that this is a little bit more of an easier, more traditional user interaction design pattern. And so I'm going to skip down a little bit more, but what I wanted to show you is that it can also do some things like generate data. Sometimes in data analysis, we want to generate some fake data, and pretty easily I can go ahead and excuse me, kind of start over with a new request and say, give me, because I couldn't find the temperature data for Tuckerman Ravine, I said, give me 30 days of random weather temperature data from 10 to 40 degrees, put it in a data frame. And so that's great, but I just realized that, if I go ahead and copy this and run it, it's not, sorry, where is it? Yeah. It may be creating unrealistic data where from day to day the temperature swings are not realistic. And so again, I can sort of build upon the query that I had already created, append that, and then I'll get a different result. And finally, it is pretty knowledgeable about all sorts of different coding things. And so one of the things it can do is it can also help you generate visualizations. And so part of being a data analyst is visually showing in ways that can be easily understood by people who are not familiar with data analytics. What does this data look like? What summary could I sort of come up with? And so it knows that there are different plotting libraries available for Python, and it can use matplot, which is sort of the default, probably most common plotting library that you might be familiar with, but you can also do it with Altair, which provides a sort of higher resolution and more flexible plotting method. I'm not going to show you the results there, but it definitely generates the code that you'd want. So these are all examples of Codesso operating in Google Colab, which is primarily a Python environment. There's also we have the ability to sort of look at different popular coding environments. Snack is one offered by a company called Expo. which is for mobile application development. And so Codesso is easily used for solving problems related to front-end development. And it can even help you, for example, read others' code. So here's actually a workshop that we do with our students who are looking to or want to explore coding as a profession. And so we demonstrate how we created a Stranger Things Magic 8-ball application. And we used something called React Native to allow us to build this with one set of code, and it works on iOS, Android, and also on websites. And so Snack is an online IDE where we can play around with this, and React and JavaScript, or TypeScript as a language. And so let's say I'm new to React and I'm looking at some code and I'm going, what is this const upside down, set upside down, use state false thing? All right. So I can use a different mode of Codesso to, instead of generating code, I can have it explained. And so note that it defaulted to JavaScript in this environment, and it's giving me a plain English explanation of what this line of code is doing. And it knows, because it's looking at the code and it sees upside down and use state. It's not just searching out on the web and trying to create a crazy answer. So there are many other environments that we work in. One of them happens to be Go. And so I don't know how to program Go. I know what it does. We don't use it here at MentorWorks, not yet at least. But Go is pretty cool. And so, why don't we think about the next step in terms of trying to solve some programming problems with Go? But, just to summarize sort of the benefits of using Codesso, right? It helps you read code that are written by others, because it's actually doing, it's reading what you're putting in there and providing an intelligent AI-based response. It often provides the most concise and simplest solution to a problem. Excuse me. And it handles pretty complex problems that, like I said earlier, would otherwise require you to break up your inquiries into separate pieces and then try to pull them together, which will slow you down and frustrate you. It doesn't take you out of context, so you're always working within your coding environment. Imagine needing even just to look at a reference. What does the pandas merge function do? You can do that in Codesso rather than having to open another tab and visit yet another website. It's easy to build upon your initial query and to continue to build and generate a result that is more and more complete. I didn't get into it in detail, but when I was creating a graph, a visualization, I didn't think to put a title on it. And so all I had to do was, and please title the graph XYZ. And it just augmented the code with the appropriate line that adds the title. So again, really convenient and quick to do things that are really simple. And, as you do this, you become more experienced, and you know how to articulate your queries. And ultimately, you may not need Codesso to answer those questions. And again, it produces a sort of sensible output for your context. So when I'm working within Colab, that's Python. When I'm working within Snack, it's JavaScript. Codesso is going to get smarter, and it's going to adapt a little bit more to how you work. And so, for example, if your preferred plotting library in Python is Altair, then it can automatically provide responses in Altair and not Matplot. So that's an example of ways it can get smarter. So back to our challenge. I'm going to pause here for a second. We're going to get into the Go part, but anything I can get into and answer?
I don't see any new questions. I just posted a love the Stranger Things reference.
Yeah.
My kids think I'm a nerd. I am one.
Awesome.
All right, we got a question from Pravin. Wish this helped when I was learning how to code. Is there a way to generate unit test cases for the existing code base?
This is really interesting. So one of the things that we're trying to do with Codesso is apply it. It is a general purpose tool, but we are huge into data science. Like I said, our CEO teaches data science and machine learning, and we've identified some fairly, I don't want to call them niche, but some fairly targeted use cases around software development that we think this could provide some significant value. So when you're learning how to code, a good instructor will very early on make sure that you are aware of the importance of testing. And some instructors will instruct you to write tests before you write completed code. And what that means is, let's say I need a conversion function that's going to convert from miles per hour to knots. And so first you write a test that says, if I know that 100 miles per hour equals 87 knots, let's say. So I'm going to write a test first that just compares the two, and I'm going to make it fail. And then I'm going to write my function. And once it runs through my function, it's going to succeed. And so now anytime I change that function, I can just rerun the test, and a lot of these testing harnesses will run it for you automatically, so that you know that when you're making changes to your code, it won't break. And so one thing you can ask for, and I'd be happy to try this, is we'll generate a function. We'll ask Codesso to generate a function and a unit test for it. And so every time you are asking for something, imagine that you're also given the unit test for it. That will save you a lot of time. It's becoming a more proficient and professional software developer. Is there a way is there a way to generate unit test cases for an existing code base? There are some limitations in terms of how much you can feed into a query. You could certainly break it up and say, look, here's a class, a Python class that, let's say it represents a calculator. It has an add method, a subtract method, a multiply and divide method. And so you should be able to give the Codesso your class code, and it should be able to write tests for it. To what extent in terms of the amount of code it can process, we're still sort of exploring how well that works. There is a cost on our side for every query that we execute, and so there's a good question here I see around monetization plans. If we have some more time at the end, I can talk about that. There's some interesting news in the industry I would love to get to towards the end that is a lesson learned in terms of monetizing AI coding assistance. So cool. Good. All right. So let's move on to solving this specific problem. That's always the problem with slideshows, is every time you click it, it advances when you don't want it to. All right. Convert a list of average monthly wind speeds on Mount Washington from miles per hour to knots and sort them from highest to lowest. So I think I sort of have that over here, but you know what? Let me do this for a second. All right. And this is the Go playground. Go or Go Lang. Sometimes these terms are interchangeable. The Go website offers a playground where you can do some simple things with Go. And so we also embed ourselves here. It's early for support for this, so we embed, but we don't have the features that let you go end to end in terms of moving code back and forth. So right now it's limited to copy paste. But I should be able to, let's see, convert a list of wind speeds from miles per hour to knots and sort them from highest to lowest. Okay, that's cool. So let's go ahead and do that. And you saw that Go is the default. And so here's a bunch of code. I am not a Go programmer. I know enough about strongly typed languages to be able to interpret this on my own. Strongly typed languages tend to have things like, annotations that specify what data type things are. But Go is meant to be easy to use, and it can be terse at times. So yeah, that's great. I went ahead and generated some code for me. I'm going to go ahead and put that in here and run it. And the way Go works is, the way the Go playground works is your code doesn't actually run in the browser. It goes off to a server, it gets executed, and then the response comes back on the bottom here. And so, yeah, this was cool. Love it. There were some sample wind speeds it put in here. That's fine. Okay, I can see it wrote a function that multiplies the speed by 0.86 to get to knots. That's cool. Oh, you know what? I didn't like the fact that it produced like highly sort of fractional numbers here. Why don't I go ahead and say, you know what? Ensure that the output values are rounded to whole numbers. And let's see what that does. That's going to run. Very cool. and it's using some kind of rounding technique to make sure that it's doing that. I don't know if I really like that, but let's see what happens. Copy, paste it, and run. And here we go. We got some whole numbers. So those are the sort of essentials. That's essentially how it works. For sites that we don't embed in specifically, you can access Codesso as a pop-up as well. So I might be on a site. This is just my about blank page, but I can invoke it from here. And so I have access to it, and I can just make it go away if I don't want to see it anymore. What are some other things that it can do? I think that's kind of the essence of my the presentation here. Let's see what's next. Cool. Okay, yeah. So at this point, happy to answer questions, play around with it, see what happens. If you'd like me to ask some queries, it's very efficient. For example, at CSS. So let's say that I want to know how to create a button that has a 3-pixel border. What's the CSS for that, right? So create a button with a 3-pixel green border. And I'm going to switch the language to CSS. And so this query, it got a little confused in terms of, it applied a 3-pixel solid green border, but it sort of combined HTML and CSS together to get me a response. I think I could just simplify this for CSS. I just want the CSS in CSS form, and that would be the line of code that you would do there. You would put there, and explains what this is and offers some other resources. Right now, we limit those resources to certain websites that we think are providing really good answers, and that's just a way to try to eliminate some of the noise that you get from a query.
We've got some questions in the chat. Let's see. Mario says, "Are you able to export notebook outputs?"
Export notebook outputs. So would that be something that the notebook tool should be doing? And by export, what would you mean by that? Are you talking about what is shown in the Codesso output here?
He says diagrams or plots.
So let me ask another question on top of that. Do you mean plots that are rendered in the notebook, or to actually run the plot inside Codesso over here so you see the plot?
Feel free to come off mute if you want to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Inside the notebook. So say if you actually ran and you said, plot the wind speeds for like the next week, and it derived a scatter plot for you. Would you be able to export those? I don't know, as a PDF or something?
There's some research. No, we can't do that now, but we are doing some research into again the use of the utility of Codesso in a data science or data analyst context. And one of the things that we're hearing is that students, but also people who are professional analysts, are using multiple tools to do what they need to do. And if there were some features in Codesso that would allow them to create essentially projects that cross different tools, that might be one of them, which would be, I'm using, Kaggle for one thing, and I'm using Colab for another. I want to create a project in Codesso. I want all the resources or notebooks I'm working on linked in there. And then a feature like that might make sense. Export all of my notebooks, or export the visualizations from my notebooks in one place. So I think that's that would be the product going in a little bit of a different direction. But fantastic idea. That's definitely something we're interested in.
That actually hits on what I was thinking about in general. That's along the lines that I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah, great question.
Future feature.
Yep.
Brendan asks, this is more on the business side, what's the overall monetization plan for Codesso?
Excellent question. So that brings me to a story I need to tell. I'll try to keep it short. So there was an early player in this field, product called Kite. In mid-November, they decided that after working with or after building a user community of 500,000 developers, they realized that it was very difficult to sell an AI-based coding assistant to individual developers and engineering managers who are managing developers in corporate environments, because the efficiencies that were gained, and again, this is I think Kite entered the market in 2014 or 2013, years before this sort of GPT technology became accessible to folks like us. After 500,000 developers, building a user base of 500,000 developers, they had to shut down. They just could not get people to pay. And so that's kind of the case of where, like, you've got something that's really cool. A lot of people are going to use it, but you were kind of betting the farm on things that you may not have been able to validate fast enough in terms of, is there product market fit? Do you have a paying customer? And so that ties back to some experience I've had with iCore in terms of, us as entrepreneurs being pushed to do the right amount of customer discovery, to know, to get a yes, like, I would pay X dollars for this, and it is valuable to me. I would recommend it to a friend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so to try to connect it to the question here, the monetization strategy, we don't currently think that this is the kind of thing where we can sell subscriptions to individual developers. GitHub Copilot, after some bumps in the road, I think ultimately will be successful in certain markets with their subscription-based approach. I think you pay $10 per month, and it becomes active within your VS Code, or I think they're jumping into some other popular IDEs. And for $10 a month, you get, in context code assistance. To me, I'm a subscriber for that, and I think it's invaluable. It does something that is different than what Codesso does, but it is quite valuable to me, and I think ultimately they will be successful. They're also part of GitHub, and so it's easy to just sort of be upsold on adding that to your existing GitHub subscription if you've got one. So we're still exploring it. We ultimately think that the monetization for Codesso is more in terms of partnerships. Potentially advertising, we're not sure yet, but our current plans are not to put distracting advertising into this and have it be primarily ad driven and difficult and unpleasant to use.
I mean, you could even use it as a tool for all of your code school providers.
Yeah,
like resources that they may pay for, like a subscription base that is already rolled into your MentorWorks framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got a business team working on this, thinking about how we might monetize it. But for us right now, we think the primary value is for our MentorWorks students and community to give something back. Here's something that can help you grow your skills faster, and at right now, no cost, and that's the current plan. Other interested parties subsidizing it is probably going to work out better for us.
Brendan, you want to divulge your question a little more, expand?
Yeah, just a little bit. So I think that's a really interesting perspective that obviously you guys have looked into with the other similar competing application not having the proper market fit and going out of business. I could see that there's going to be a lot of competition for this type of tooling, especially powered off of the OpenAI APIs. Because of that, everyone kind of has the same leg up, so it's about differentiating. But I could definitely see, like I think Pravin was saying in the chat, some of his questions asking about analyzing a code base, generating code tests and things like that would be really valuable. And it wouldn't be necessarily trying to get individual developers or even perhaps teams of developers to pay a licensing or like a subscription fee, but it'd be more so focused on upper management using it as a part of their software development lifecycle, and being able to do things like risk management, security, bugs, code coverage with unit tests, static analysis, all sorts of metrics that you could do if you could find a way to do it. The problem is with GPT in particular, it's not necessarily that kind of machine learning tool. It's more like a tool that you can for querying, for prompts, for prompt engineering, like you mentioned. It's something that you can do in a limited way. So it might be interesting to see how potentially you could pair Codesso, its functionality, with a more unique, long-lived code-based type tooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. We do, as part of our customer discovery process, we talk to engineering managers at startups to see, what were their chief concerns in terms of actually primarily bringing in entry-level software developers. Because if this tool, the one thing that we heard loud and clear is that, especially at larger organizations, the time it takes to mentor and pair with an entry-level developer, that's pulling time away from other things. And so certainly you need to invest in your employees and help them grow. But if you can, relieve some of that effort, using a tool like this, where that entry-level developer can become more accustomed to writing the code the way that those teams want to write code, that would generate some significant value, because the team lead time, management lead time, is valuable, more and expensive. And so we did hear that. Not sure exactly how Codesso might help there. I think our connection there was like, if we can help a new software developer learn how to write tests properly, that would be something that would be a significant value. Or analyzing the code, like you said, and ensuring that the best practices of software development were being met. This is code generation, but code analysis for sure. That could be an interesting space.
Yeah, Key, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, or Kai. He also says, what do you guys think would be a good monetization strategy? So similar. I hope that answered your question, because we did get into that a little bit. I think this is just the initial, right? So like I think anybody using this, by the way, if you have feedback, or you've got thoughts, or like you implemented it at work, or you used it to help train a junior, please give us that feedback. I'm sure Mike would love to have that feedback. Pravin, you have a question as well. This is more the technical side. GitHub Copilot learns from open source projects. How does Codesso train itself?
Interesting. So right now, it is simpler than Copilot, right? Copilot, the advantage that Copilot has is that it has access to all of the latest models, and is being trained specifically on coding. Codesso is a little bit more of a general tool, so it can be deployed for uses not just related to writing the actual code, but doing things like data analytics. As I showed you, I copied and pasted some tab delimited text, and it was able to create a data frame for me. Our goal is not to create a sort of Copilot-like experience where we're taking what you're doing and feeding it back into the engine. At least not yet. That requires some pretty massive resources. We're a fairly small team trying to find a great way to deploy this general GPT type technology to solve a problem for aspiring coders, and in the data analysis space and software development. So I don't have an answer, I think, on that's like the greatest in terms of or the most ambitious. We're trying to create something that's simple to use, enjoyable, fast, reliable, and gets you on your way.
Any other questions, folks? This has been an awesome hour. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of feedback and questions. I'll also tag the partnership in our next newsletter, so it goes out to our larger community. And we thank you so much for providing this resource for us, and for being a guest speaker today for January. Mario says this is pretty awesome for data analytics. I can't tell you how much time I spend on getting the data to be viewed in a certain way, because I'm not a data engineer. So, I definitely know we are not jacks of all trades, or some people know a little bit of everything, but, this is going to help us in our journey as technologists, as we grow, as we evolve, for sure. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Have a great night.